Hi geometry class. So today we're going to use our new workbooks that you should have just gotten passed out in the classroom. If not, ask the sub for them in the back of the room. They're already labeled with your name on them and which class period you're in for me. Okay, once you have your book, I want you to open it to page 139. We're going to be using these books every single day in our class, so make sure you're bringing it every day this week, next week, and for the rest of the school year. Okay, these are super important. This is also going to cut down on how much you have to write because you just get to fill in the blanks instead of having to copy the problem down and do all the work for it. Okay, so we're going to work through these sections together. So we're starting with section 5, topic 4, and we're talking about triangle congruence. So there are 4 different theorems or properties which we can use to determine that triangles are congruent. We're going to talk about 2 of them and then talk about 2 more a little bit later. So what information do we need to determine whether 2 different triangles are congruent? Remember, our sign for congruent is like an equal sign with a squiggle on top. And 2 things are congruent when they have the same size. So for a triangle to be congruent, same angles and the same side lengths. Okay, so one or the other would be sufficient to show that the triangles are congruent. Okay, so going down to the next part of the page. So when we state triangle congruency, the order of the letters in the name of the triangle is extremely important. So we have triangle A, B, C, and then we have E, D, and F. Okay, we have to match up and list them in the same order. So if I list A first, well, it only has one little arc thing there. So we have triangle A, and then triangle what? Well, which angle in this triangle on the right only has one arc in the corner? Oh, well, it's angle D. So we'll list that one first. Okay, then we're going to go to angle B. It has 2 little marks in the corner. So we have triangle AB next. Okay, which angle of our right triangle has 2 little hash marks? Well, it's F, of course. So we have DF. And then what would be left? C and E. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DFE. These hash marks on the side also tell us that this side length is congruent to this one. Similarly, the one with 3 is congruent to this one that has 3 as well. So let's practice doing this. So we're going to scooch over to the right side of our page and let's look at this problem at the top. It says if triangle JKL is congruent to triangle COT, finish the following congruent statements and mark the corresponding congruent sides and the corresponding congruent angles. Okay, so JKL is congruent to COT. Okay, so let's go ahead and mark our triangles because that'll help us answer these questions easier. Okay, so if angle J is congruent to angle C, because they're both listed first, then K is congruent to O, and then T and L would be congruent. And since it's hard to draw 3 lines with these markers, I'm going to change colors so you know which one it is. So T and L are congruent. Okay, next let's do the sides. Well, J and L both share the same angles as C and T, so those 2 would be congruent. Okay, which one shares the purple and the 2 blue? Well, OT. And which one over here? Well, L and K. Then the last side would have our 3, like so. So now let's fill in the blanks of the things at the top. So JK is going to be congruent to what? Well, CO. Okay, what about CT? So CT has 1 hash mark and JL has 1 hash mark. So it would be JL. Next we're looking at KL has 2 and TO also has 2. TO has 2, TWO. Okay, what about angle J? Well, angle J is our 1 blue arc, so it would be angle C. Then what's congruent to angle T? Angle L. They both have the purple arc. Okay, what about angle K? Has two blue arcs, so it would be angle O. So that's how we label and identify our congruent triangles. Okay, so let's practice again with the next one at number 2. So I'm going to slide this up so you can see it. So complete the congruent statements for the triangles. Triangle TRI is congruent to what triangle? Well, we need to list them in the same order. So T has 3. Which one over here has 3? A does. So we'll list A first. Okay, R has 1 and it matches up to G. And then lastly, we have I, which has 2, and then N, so AGN. Well, what does that tell us that angle I is congruent to what? Well, it's congruent to angle N, just like so. All right, now let's flip the page and let's go to page 140. We're going to do a couple more examples like this. Okay, so page 140, we have, let's consider the same triangle where angle TRI is congruent to triangle GNA. We want to mark the corresponding congruent sides with hash marks and the corresponding congruent angles with arcs. So let's do this quickly. We're getting to be pros at this. So triangle T and G line up because they're listed first. Then R and N are next. And then I and A. Okay? Then it says for us to mark the corresponding sides with hash marks. So we did the angles, now let's do the sides. So let's start with the one that has 3 and 2. So let's put 1 hash mark there, 3 and 2, well that's going to match up there. IR matches up with AN. Then looking at IT, we'll put 2 hash marks. And that's going to match up to GA. And then TR will match up with GN. So now let's go to part B. So it says to state that 2 triangles are congruent, we don't need to know that all 3 sides and all 3 angles are congruent. There are 4 postulates, remember it's a fact that we don't have to prove, that help us determine triangle congruency. And we have some acronyms for us to help us remember them. So the first one we're going to look at is side, 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 or we write it as SSS. And then there's side, angle, side. So we have a side, all 3 sides are congruent, the triangles are congruent. If a side, an angle, and then another side, well then they're both congruent. And then the last one is angle, angle, side, and angle, side, angle. So we're going to focus on 1 and 2 first, and then we'll get to 3 and 4 a little bit later today in class. Okay, so keep moving over. We're on page 140, going to slide over to the right side, and we see our side, side, side congruence postulate. It says if 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of a second triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. We can prove the following triangles are congruent by the SSS congruence postulate. So you have angle XYZ and TUV. We want to write the congruent statements for the triangles above. Remember, the order of the letters matters. So we start with angle X and then go to Y and then to Z. We need to follow the same order when we look at triangle TU and V. So TUV would be the same order. Now let's look at the next one, side, angle, side, congruence postulate. So if 2 sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent, to two sides of the included angle of the second triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. So let's look at triangle ACT and triangle URL. We see that side AC is congruent to UR, and then side CT is congruent to RL. So we have the two sides, and then we have the angle in between, looking at angle C and angle R. They are both congruent. So we have this side, this angle, and this side. This side, and this angle that are all congruent. So let's write the congruency statement for the triangles above. Remember, we have to write them in the order that's correct. The letters have to match up. So we have triangle. Let's start with ACT. And then we're going to say that's congruent to triangle what? Well, this side with one hash mark is where I started, so I went UR. And then that was the common angle, it's in the middle. And then I went to L, because I went ACT, URL. Okay, the side-side angle congruence exists, and explain if it does or does not. This does not. This would not give us that two triangles are congruent, okay? Well, easy way to remember this is we don't cuss in geometry. SSS, SAS, no SSA, or the other way around.